Okay, 4 o'clock.
All right, here we go.
We have a quorum. Can I get we need to approve the quorum
I
or
move that,
the agenda, excuse me.
I move that we approve the agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And now we need the meeting minutes for the 16th of January.
I'll make a motion to approve the January 16th, 2025 board meeting minutes.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the consent agenda.
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda. I'll second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And there is no public.
No public, no.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Melanie Hobart with FCS Group was going to join us just to give a little bit of an overview of how the interim rate studies that we've done throughout the last couple of years are kind of a maintenance versus a larger effort that we do every 5 years. So it's been 5 years, it will be this year, 5 years since we've done our more elaborate rate study. So we're up. This is this last 5% was the, oh, there she is. This last 5% was the final of the 5-year increases that we had. So I'll introduce Melanie here real quick. As soon as her audio connects. Hey, Melanie.
Hello, how are you?
How are you? Good, good. We've got the board of, there you are. All right. It looks pretty sunny in Colorado.
It is, isn't it always, right?
Don't remind me.
I know.
Although you could probably see a little bit of sunshine and blue skies out our window too.
It
We're
looks
pretty,
pretty sunny there too. Yeah.
yeah, having a good day. Well, Melanie, I was just bringing up the 5-year nature of the more comprehensive rate study. So perfect timing. Maybe you can just introduce yourself and go into a little bit about how it differs from the updates we've done.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Melanie Hobart. I am a project manager with FCS Group. We have done your rate studies a couple times now. In the past, when I got involved last time, we did what we call a revenue requirement, as well as some small updates. This time, what we're proposing is a little bit of a more comprehensive study. So when we think about a rate study, there's kind of 3 main parts, and then there's kind of a 4th side one. So when we think about the main parts, you think about a revenue requirement. I like to think of that as determining how big of a pie the utility needs. So how much money in total do you need to run your water utility? From there, we go into cost of service. Cost of service looks at it as how individual classes should pay for the service. So how are their costs related to how they impact the system? I like to think of that as you're slicing up the pie now to the different classes that you have. And then the last step is rate design. So rate design is really within each class, how you distribute those costs. You have different options, you have fixed fees, you have variable fees, you've got a variety of things you can use their different tools. So they all come together and they all impact different levels of kind of honing in on your customers. So certainly, revenue requirement overall, that gives you the overall financial stability for your utility. But if you're considering any sort of rate adjustments, and I think you are, Tim and I, we've talked about kind of some of the commercial rate questions and otherwise, you really want to have that basis of doing the cost of service, which really looks at those specific class patterns of behavior before you come up with any sort of rate shifts in structure or design there. So that's the idea behind kind of doing the more comprehensive full study. This time, it is something we typically recommend doing every, 5-ish years. It does change over time as your customer base shifts a little bit, as your patterns of usage shift. So you just want to check in on it every 5 or so years. And then between that, we do kind of the financial plans and otherwise to make sure overall everything is good. So that's the background of why we're looking at a little bit of a bigger study this year. But of course, it's up to you what you're interested in and kind of how much you think is appropriate at this time. So
Great, thanks, Melanie. And I'll go through a little bit more and then we can open it up if that's all right with the board. So the other nice part for us in doing a more comprehensive rate study, not only are we able to tie the finances with things like our debt service, the things that we're required to pay for that we owe, keeping the lights on, keeping, but the capital improvement plan. And as we've seen through the last 5 years, that's changed quite a bit based on, how effective 3 to 8 was. The GFCs, the development patterns have not been as intense as we anticipated 5 years ago. So a lot of those larger projects have moved out in time. That's going to completely change how we go about, one, what we need to plan for fixed income, as well as how we project when we start beginning to take debt on, how we repay that debt. And based on what I really like about what FCS does as a good visual is they're able to show kind of your financial report card year to year based on revenue on hand and debt upcoming. So if you start getting low in one category, it turns red, which means you've got to make adjustments in your rate model to address that, or shift some of your capital planning or some of your other expenses out. So plus we don't really have a crystal ball to forecast how we achieve those future capital expenses. The being able to look ahead and being able to plan and project how much income we have on hand at a specific time in future gives us those tools through this. The last thing I'll touch on is the GFC update. The last time we did a comprehensive GFC update was almost 5 years ago, and that increased the overall cost of a developer coming in at what we sell a connection for. And what the big purpose of that is not putting the burden on the existing customer, but making the future pay for the future and the existing pay for the existing. So it's that transparency between the two. And that's a category that's included in here as well. Chris, I wanted to open up the floor to you too, because I know this is something when in your wheelhouse is a fairly important aspect as well. So if you care to add anything, certainly you don't have to.
I think it's very important, specifically to the long-term CapEx development of the district, whatever that future looks like. Just in the last few years, we've had some significant work, increases in cost. So where are we really at in terms of our long-term strategy in relation to those price increases, et cetera? And are we positioned correctly in order to be successful? So I think this is a really good investment in my view.
Okay, thanks a lot. And that's really all I have, besides I think Melanie already went over effectively the class analysis, how much is commercial adequately paying what commercial needs to? Is Green Bluff adequately paying what they need to? Is residential overpaying? So those are the kinds of things that cost of service analysis provides as well. So today is an action that we are seeking to start that. We have a meeting scheduled later this month to have the kickoff meeting February 20th. To begin the data collection needs, and unfortunately, a large part of that falls on our colleague here in the financial side, but it really is what puts the meat on the bone. The total, as a recap, is estimated. A lot of these, like the document and presentation, is up to the board when we get to it. How much of a presentation do we want? How much of a report do we want? So some of these costs are flexible. But the budget right now as set is $88,920 with I think, Melanie, a fairly it's fair to say not to exceed in that amount. I think there's a
That's
lot
right.
of things in here that, okay,
That's right. Yep.
so any questions?
An action to proceed.
Correct, yeah, action to,
Motion on
I think the formal action would be to, allow staff to go under, contract with FCS Group for the 2025 5-year, updated water rate study.
I'll make a motion that our staff can get into contract with FCS for a water study.
Second.
Okay,
all right. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
all right, Melanie, well, thank you so much. And I think there is opportunity for us to do a lot more work, at least us be able to see you in this forum again as we move through this study. So thank you, and we'll see you on the 20th.
The 20th. All right. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
I don't want to end. I'm so used to doing that, you know, when we're done with the meeting.
Just have a one-person meeting.
Okay, so the next agenda item is a late addition, but is an important one, and it has to do with the CAT generation system that we planned for the 3 CDE well field. I think it was in the packet. I've got it available here as well. The purpose of us bringing this to you, and kind of the reason for the late addition, is we did learn yesterday that there would be a 5% increase on the overall cost of this if we were to wait.
Thinking in the next month or so, Cat Corporate's gonna push down a 5% rate increase due to things. Think in the past, we had talked about this, we may have mentioned that we were looking at a 1,200 kilowatt generator to be able to power 2 of the wells with the single generator. In kind of exploring that more, we can save about $90,000 by buying 2 generators. It would be like close to 390,000 for the very large one, and only about 150 for 1/2 the size. So we thought it'd be better to have 2 generators than 1, in case we have a maintenance issue with one. We still have the other instead of all of our eggs in one basket. But and we're looking at about a 20-week lead time to get these items. So if we were to order it in the next month, hopefully we would receive it in July sometime, and potentially we could get it installed before fire season and those other potential concerns. We would still be waiting on the 2nd generator until the 3E well gets further along. We're not projecting that to be online until sometime next year. We don't want to be holding on to one, but you know, we're seeking approval or a motion to procure 600 kilowatt generator and associated automatic transfer switch. I think at the bottom line, we're looking at 151,000, 153,000 plus tax, which is a little bit more than the previous one we paid for. They've already had a 4.7% increase. But it's essentially the same unit as the one we have in operation at well 2C. And our hope is to have 3 of those by next year's end, and we can
swappable parts.
yeah, and just for consistency and ease of use. And they do come with a 5-year warranty. And we've been pretty pleased with the unit that we have now and the support we've been getting. Again, I think at one time we've talked about the issues with the Cummins generators and the nature of their service, and we're very pleased with CAT.
So when you finish the whole project installation and everything, what are we looking at price wise?
So we would be responsible for unloading it on the, with the crane, hiring a crane for a couple grand and, I haven't quoted it all out with Jim, but basically we have, some conductor and a little asphalt patch to bring into the unit or into the station. I'm suspecting less than 20,000 or the large cost is the copper conductor going from the generator to the transfer switch and into the disconnect. And copper market is kind of variable, but we have some time to try to position ourselves well for that purchase. Should only be 20 grand. We already
Oh,
have
but-
most of the stuff.
So Matt, is this like buying a car? I mean, do we get any kind of a discount or are we paying full retail or what's the deal with this?
There is no discount on this type of equipment unless you're buying a lot of them. If you have buying power, you wanna negotiate 10 units at one time, you might be able to get some small savings, but really don't have that kind of buying power.
Are these units mobile? I mean, can you move them or are they, once they're down, they're down?
These units are intended to be stationary. You're not supposed to move generators with fuel in them. It becomes, there's some issues with, you basically have to have a rig that's built to move the generator, which we don't really need for any other purpose. And, do you have it exercised when it's on the truck and not deployed? And maintenance and different things.
So basically not a good idea.
Yeah, there's some things that maybe a mobile generator could be useful for. But there's some added cost to that too. There's gonna be a premium for that over a standalone station.
Then, if I can, there are rental through United units that we've used in the past that I think could serve that roving need if, you know, there was a specific, but yeah, that's one thing. I think we were on board with too, looking at mobility and it not only cut the generation power, but the headaches of moving fuel, but finding a proper rig to be able to move it. It just
You're basically looking at it.
If we need it, somebody else needs it and they may not be available.
That's also the situation, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so renting doesn't always pay.
Right, we have talked to the city, the city has two that are mobile, that if they weren't being used, they would. You know, give their brethren in the water world priority, however.
They're first served.
Yeah, they're for serve, at the same time, the city can make their own power, they got a much broader grid. Than say our slice of northern county. Yes, seeking a motion.
So take a motion
Oh,
to,
go ahead.
One more question. How does this fit into our forecasted budget for this year?
It's in there.
Okay, is that this kind of cost that
Yeah,
we're looking at?
yeah, we
Okay,
absorbed the same one last year.
Okay.
Pretty standard.
all right.
We actually had both generators in the budget for the 3D project, in the last version of the budget. One of those will end up getting paid in next year's, but I think we're gonna be under, when you take that 390 versus the 300, plus the 20, we're gonna be under budget.
Do we have a generator for this location?
There is no generators at this location, yeah. So this, again, provides water from the yellow zone to the very large green zone, pink zone, purple zone. We do not have a generator for any of that, which 3 of you live in that. Actually, 4 of the 5.
So you're saying we have 4 concern. Well, yeah, cause it not only does it serve the 3.8, it serves 3 as well.
3.8, we can get water to 3 in an emergency and all of 9. In the winter, we could use the one that we have installed to supplement, and if it were to happen today, we could probably power all of that with the 1. But had that happen, that situation come about in late September or October, we would have a gap to fill. I'm anticipating that PSPS with the Vista is going to become more problematic for us in 2025 and beyond due to recent events along the West Coast.
That's Vista's ability to pull the plug whenever they.
I've been trying to set up a meeting with them to understand maybe ahead of time what they're thinking, what may happen here in terms of change in administering that program on their side.
Well, I'll move that we approve the generator purchase. Is that what you want? Motion to approve purchase, yeah.
We get a second?
Second.
You're always,
Oh.
You even gave him the microseconds.
all in favor?
Aye.
Well, thank you. As for updates, we've been a flurry of activity getting the final aspects of our record of examination for our mitigation right. That includes conversations with the state and Department of Ecology on our grant to ensure we're about to pull the plug on the acquisition and making sure that the payback and all of that is set up. As well as just making sure all of the fine details, like the appraised evaluation of the water rights. One thing I did want to remind the board of, as this will come up at the next meeting, if not the next meeting, the meeting following, that we are paying the difference, the district is paying the difference between the appraised value of the water rights and what we went under contract with Brad West in that purchase and sale agreement 2 years ago. So I'll do a quick little presentation on that next time or the time after to remind everyone, just for full transparency, that will be a cost of the district that won't be covered under the grant agreement. But everything's looking good and moving smoothly in that transfer. I know I've talked about it quite a bit and we've had very little motion, but the nature and how uncharacteristic of a request this has been of ecology to have water rights taken from one base placed in another. I don't know that this kind of transaction has been done before on the eastern side of Washington. So that's, I think, speaks to a lot of the how careful ecology is in just making sure their I's are dotted and their T's are crossed. I usually screw those two up. But yeah, so that's really it. Besides our excitement on the rate study and some blurbs that the economy and some of the things that are coming with tariffs and the impacts to lumber and some of those other issues may have on GFCs. So we'll be pretty cognizant of watching markets as we go through this. As we know, those markets tend to go up quickly and take quite a while to come down. So if there's no questions for me, I'll pass it over to Matt.
Cool. Well, thank you guys. I do have a presentation for today. We have completed our hydraulic water summary for the year. Commissioner Hare was asking about it here last time and Teresa and I put this together the last few days. Is it 11?
F5.
There we go. I do have to eat a little bit of crow. I was a little bit off on my estimate that I quoted you. When scouring the numbers, we found a few more numbers and Teresa and I rectified both of our numbers. So see if I can make this viewable for you. I got a lot of stuff on the screen. I'm just gonna start out with the historical. I think I've showed this graph before. But roughly we pumped 3.7 billion gallons this year, roughly in line with last year, less than 21, less than 18, less than 15, and we sold roughly about the same. So not a marquee year, but fairly average. We're not seeing drastic increases or drastic declines in climate and irrigation, any of those things. So, got the leakage down here at the bottom for those that care. We're at roughly 8.1% leakage this year, which is a little bit of an increase of last year. Still well below our 10% guideline and rule by Department of Health. But kind of here's where the numbers really lie. We sold 3.4 billion gallons, pumped 3.7. I think that's roughly 3 loon lakes. If you're familiar with some lakes, our leakage was up about 27% volumetrically over last year. We were around 250 gallons of unaccounted water, closer to 303 million this year, at least best that we can measure. And our rolling average is about 7.4%. There's a lot of things that go into these numbers. Of course, all of the production meters at the well facilities and all of the distribution meters as the customers' homes. The Water Association, AWWA, requires those to be within 1.5%. So just due to those errors, this number could be at 3%, just due to the nature of the meters. My goal is to get it down below 5%, but we sold a little bit less water and pumped a little bit more. Our leakage had to go up. Unfortunately, kind of the breakdown of all that water. Residential was slightly down volumetrically from the year before, but both commercial and multifamily were up. I think the big portion of the multifamily is that there's more units out there, a few more complexes online. Notable that irrigation was slightly down, which is a good thing. If you recall, last year we had some decent rains every couple of weeks, like we hadn't had years before. But construction water was up. It's kind of a random one, but also notable, our non-revenue water or Whitworth Water District water that we did not sell to ourselves, but consume in one way or another was down. Even though we have a new facility online, we've reduced some irrigation, and the large component of that probably is irrigation because it was wet last year. But fill station was up a bit. I think we were 2.8 million gallons last year, so it's continuing to do well. And then I have a list. It's a new thing Bill and Teresa and I started in the last year or two. Sorry, Lee, I'm putting you way down in the corner so we can see. This is the list of notable leaks we fixed this year. There's other small ones that didn't make the list and numerous on the customer side that the customer had to fix that may or may have not contributed to loss, depending on where their meter was. If the meter is in their house and their line is leaking between the street and the house, that's also unaccounted water. However, it's the customer's responsibility to fix that, and sometimes that takes a while. But didn't have any large ones like maybe some years gone by, which was nice. But really, two things to note here. Most of the leaks were in steel mains and galvanized pipe. Most of those are old. You got we try to include year on here because that kind of tells its own story. There's some newer ones, and some oddballs there, but the large majority of them are pre-1980 or 45 plus years old. We did make some really notable efforts here at the end of the year, and we have some other suspected areas. So we are believing that leakage number should be better in 25 than it was in 24 because of this work. But at the same time, new things come about too. So we are continuing on distribution meter replacement and trying to find all of the meters that may be out of calibration, and we are testing all of the source meters again this year for calibration. Last year could have been impacted slightly by those meters. We replaced 3 source meters last year, so if they were off, it could be that was making our leakage number look a little lower last year, but it is a very large area. and these last three at the bottom are all within a couple of blocks of each other over 2 weeks. We scoured those 3 or 4 streets up there, and we have one that we completed in January and another one up there that we're concerned about, maybe leaking, so. It's really the presentation for water loss that we had. This will end up getting reported to the state, and in the consumer confidence report later this year, but. It's kind of the water usage summary. I can scroll back if there's any questions or dialogue that y'all would like to have. We're fixing leaks all year long. Counting our blessings today that we had better luck than the city there.
I heard about that.
If you drove by the Y today, there's some problems southbound.
There's a swimming pool.
Yeah, Wendell Ford is completely out of water. And the city had an issue on the 12-inch line right at the Y, and it's necked down to 1 lane southbound. Will likely be that way all night and tomorrow. They eroded a good portion of the highway under the pavement. Ended up being a fire hydrant related issue, but I was there at 10 to 6 this morning. And was happy to report that it did not affect any of our stuff,
Yeah.
and we did not contribute. I did learn that the area of Mel's Nursery and that veterinarian, we did used to serve on that side of the highway. And very well could have been involved in this today if we still had those services, but at some point, as they were annexing north, we gave those ones on the east side of the highway to the city, which was probably a good choice. Other things on the docket, Homey is planning to begin work down in Lower Glen Eden on the Glencrest AC protection project a week earlier than they had originally proposed. So last week of February, they're gonna get started. Exceeds my expectations, so very pleased with that. We've been preparing, cleaning up all our valves, sucking them out, rotating them, making sure all of our stuff is gonna work. Found one that's busted. A little bit of scrambling there, a few other things to try to figure out. But we're gonna do some exploratory digging down there and try to learn a little bit more next week before the project starts. We did do the non-destructive testing at Reservoir 3 last week that you all approved a meeting or 2 ago. And we ended up cutting them short a little bit to try to preserve some budget in hopes we could get them to come back, because we determined the as-built we're working on from 1968 is not correct. The steel was optimized by the contractor and it's a bit thinner than what the plan shows. But we were able to find a shop drawing way deep in the records showing that that's not necessarily corrosion. Was concerning at first that there was a 20% loss in steel that we were measuring. Did not appear to be accurate, so now we've dug through a whole bunch more stuff and hopefully use the second half of that budget with Strata to look at it a little more closely now that we understand better what's going on. More on that as we learn more. We have an apartment complex being proposed, 34 units. I may have mentioned on Westview and Colfax, a single home being torn down to make 34 units. We are going to have Welch Comer and Nisha's group do a hydraulic analysis. Anytime you have that redevelopment, turning one house into 30 ERUs or units, the density and the design of the main line could be negatively impacted elsewhere down the road for, say, fire hydrant pressures and such. So we've now been asking for developers to do a study on the front end when you're doing a multifamily redevelopment and what was traditionally just a residential neighborhood. Should that all pan out, the project is getting close to approval. That's again in System 2. Still working on with Lance Douglas and his engineer on the Element 13 apartment complex there behind Frank's Diner. I did get a unit count on it now, 167 units being proposed. If that goes this year, it will meet our target for the GFCs in that one project alone. So those two alone looking like a pretty decent year. I did approve a submittal on the 7-Eleven site at 206 and Highway 2 at the south corner there at the North 40 site for a new 2-inch meter. That'll be an additional 3 ERUs. So does appear the other 2 car washes are going, and Circle K, STCU. So once a giant meteor comes, we should hit our GFC targets, hopefully in 25 and potentially make up for 24. Get our averages back up there. Other things, I hope next meeting to have a contract for our landscape services for 25 with Northwest Landscape available for review and discussion. Been a lot of time snow plowing this week, so welcome change of pace. Things slowed down a little bit. Give us some of the fellows are rebuilding meters and trying to condition some of our stock and just kind of clean things up. We're still working on our well house maintenance, getting those clay valves all cleaned and maintained, ready to go. And as the conditions allow, we're trying to dig up some stuff and fix some stuff. There's between 12 and 18 inches of frost in the ground right now, so it's not the best time to do that all of a sudden. But there's some things need done regardless. So, but those were the discussion items I had prepared for today. Happy to answer any questions or investigate other issues. If there's any questions or items you want to.
Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, welcome. It's always fun. And it's really interesting. We still have not hit the 21 peak. 22, 23, 24, 25, still nothing compared to that year where we hit 110 in June. And let's all hope that doesn't happen, because then it's irrigation from the.
And it was consistent days over 100, as I remember.
Yeah, and I think some of it was it burned up so bad right at the beginning, you can't ever catch up, you just keep pouring more water, still brown. So we're watching the stars in the skies here, hoping we don't get into hot March and April and June. We can hold some snow into July up high, that would be particularly great for everybody and our little neck of the world. But thank you, guys.
What's Chris got for us?
I have a couple things. First thing, working on getting the financial statements again to you. I was thinking maybe end of February, the last meeting in February. It's gonna be in March, first meeting in March. So last year we had, in 2023, we had a government accounting standard board pronouncement to implement. This year we have 4. So it's a little bit heavier on the year-end closeout and in compliance with, the government accounting standards board. So that's kind of hemming things up. One thing related to that, given we are implementing a new pronouncement speaking to our compensated absence calculation, they've standardized the way in which you calculate the liability on our balance sheet for the leave accrual for employees and the dollar value thereof. We present our financial statements in audit in comparative fashion, meaning we have the current year and the previous year kind of side by side. So we're going to have to restate 2023's financial statements for the correction in and around that new calculation, so that we keep that apples to apples comparison. It's just kind of the name of the game when you implement a new standard. So that is something that I'm working on getting tidied up. While doing that, Tim thought it would be a good idea if I mentioned it. I think it's a great idea. Full transparency, looking at the new calculation, discovered that we were a little outside generally accepted accounting principles and how we handled the last pay period of the year. Going back to about 2019, we have not kind of kept in line with those principles. May have not been a big issue audit-wise in previous periods. But now it plays a direct role in the new computation for GASB 101 for the compensated absence. So I reached out to SAO, asked for some guidance and offered that we could make the change this year going forward. They said no, make it in the prior period in 2023 as well. And, yeah. And, we also have a new GASB number 100 that stipulates how we are to communicate corrections in prior periods. And, we have to formally note it in our audit that we have an error in 2023 alone. They're not gonna make us go back to 2019. But wanted to make you aware of that. It might be a piece of conversation for an entrance or exit interview, but it will be in the audit formally, so if constituents read it and ask you, you'll at least be aware of it. It's not super material, and I think that by being proactive with SAO, making the correction ourselves, notating it in our audit, we'll avoid an audit finding on that issue, so. Want to say thank you to Tom for getting all the information for both 24 and 23, so I could make that adjustment. That was quite a lot of work and it was not expected. So that'll be part of our process at year end going forward, and we'll be in alignment with GAAP from then on, so. Any
So
questions?
just curious, why wasn't it found in any of our previous audits?
Well, auditors do their best, but they don't always focus on everything. They kind of do a risk assessment of the entity and then kind of drill down on where items are most prevalent in terms of issue. This year would have been probably something they would have noticed because it relates to a new pronouncement, and they would have probably done the math and kind of said, hey, where are these figures? So I didn't want to risk that. Wanted to fix it now and, you know, be open with that. But things go missed. You know, when I was closing out 2023, I looked back a couple of years and there were no entries, so I didn't catch it either. It's just kind of one of those things that the former treasurer didn't feel that was necessary anymore. And it may have made sense then, but now it's much more important that we do it now, given the new rules. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, yep.
That's it.
Nothing else? Do we have any outstanding or open forum business?
No, on my side, no.
Just the elections for 25 for Dennis and. I have a question going back to the generators, and we had discussion sometime back when we had that unforeseen emergency throughout the area and fueling those generators. Has there been a plan on how we as a district would handle keeping our generators fueled?
It's a great question.
There's a combination of things. We've generally used LJ in the past for large fuel deliveries. We have some ability to move some fuel and we try to keep our generators full. Every month or two, one of the fellows takes our flatbed and slip tank, goes tops them all off. But like these generators that we're talking about hold 1,000 gallons. Like a 2C, that generator will run for 48 hours before we need to fuel it. But if we know the power is out and may not be on in 48 hours, we're going to be calling LJ and trying to generate a contract with them to deliver every 2 days, 1,000 gallons to us.
Yeah, Dennis's point, it might be, worth some proactive work just to see what we can do to.
There's not anything that we can do. It's first come, first serve. You can put them on a retainer, but they will not guarantee it. So if you guys have other ideas of other folks that you think might guarantee it, but it also hasn't happened. So how much do we want to pay for a retainer for something that we have not traditionally ever used? It seems like a little bit wasteful to put them on a $5,000 or $10,000 retainer and then not use it,
Maybe not.
especially if they're not going to guarantee it.
Yeah, maybe not a retainer, but certainly have the conversation of what do we do in a situation? And it sounds like you've thought of that.
Yeah, it's a challenging, it's the same thing as a run on the generator. There's only so many fuel trucks in town and we'll figure out a way, Dennis, but There's numerous contractors that we could probably call upon too, that's not necessarily their forte in fuel deliveries, but they're capitalists and a lot of them we have relationships with. And certainly the customers. That's one of the things that I would potentially reach out to you all, is if you know any customers that are able to move fuel, because they have a vested interest in helping us. Or contracting with somebody in the valley, they have no vested interest. But it's a thing, like I wasn't here in 2007. Was it 2007 when the big windstorm came and knocked all those trees out and we're out of power for 5 days? We were in line for a generator. The National Guard gave us one that they were done using. When they were done using it, you could not find one in town. Doug was camped out behind the office in his RV for that entire week, trying to make things happen. But that was a long-term power outage over 100 square miles. Water use is typically low during that time of power outages, as long as it's not fire related power outages. And that's the one thing that we all need to be aware of. If power goes out, we need to stop irrigating, like right now. And that would be one of our first steps to try to reduce our fuel need, is try to get everybody to stop using their water to the lowest extent possible. We have a number of partners in that, whether it's Meade School District, Spokane County, the large irrigators we can get to fairly quickly, but particularly in the north zones that have large lots and heavy irrigation demands, that's something that we all need to be aware of. That irrigating is the worst use of that water when the power is out, and the worst use of that fuel. It's
So-
complicated.
So that's a good point. I mean, we're talking about buying new generators and we're talking about fuel needs, yada yada. Is there such a thing as a natural gas generator? And do we have natural gas at any of these locations? While
We
we're
have
talking.
natural gas here at our office, and we have natural gas at the Wandermere Heights booster station. Those are the two
Right, but I
that.
mean, where we're talking about buying these new generators, does it make sense to look at that as we're worried about moving fuel and contracting and yada yada? Is that an alternative to look at a natural gas generator, and that way we don't have to worry about these issues?
It is an alternative. The last time Inland had their big outage, Avista cut the gas too. There was a run on gas. And so do we want to be relying on another utility? I would say not, because they're gonna have their own problems. Are they able to deliver the natural gas like they were when the power is out for an extended period of time? We feel better about a semi truck delivering it to us, or being dependent on a Vista. It's a good question. When the centralized systems failed, you want to be invested in more centralized systems?
That's a tough one.
There's a lot of ways to skin that cat. The nice part is natural gas gets cut off today. We have 2 days of diesel at 2C, 48 hours of pumping time. No matter what it does. So that seems more secure to me. We're in control of that. We can go find diesel somewhere, even if it's Wenatchee. But if the pipe isn't delivering natural gas, that generator is useless to us. Those are crystal ball things, and it's a good point for discussion, and I'm happy to cut it up sideways backwards, but I think we're on the right track myself.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. I just 2 days doesn't sound like very much time, but I didn't realize they went through that much.
Oh, it's a good question.
Yeah, it's a good question, and those types of things change all the time, right? The utilities, the natural gas. There's been an effort in Washington State to no longer allow natural gas in general, and we invest in that. And then
That's ridiculous.
there's some problems
Yeah,
there,
gas-
right?
Water heaters, hot water heaters are gone, you know, we can't sell them.
Yeah.
Yeah, really? Yeah, so go to Idaho if you want, so.
That's so dumb.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I mean, if there's a,
Diesel is worse, just as bad.
Thank
but
you,
it's
King
not
County.
regulated in the same way.
yeah, you can go to any store and buy diesel, so. Yeah, good question.
Do we want to buy a fuel truck? You know, that's the route that I would lead to if we had our own 500 way to move 100 gallons, 200 gallons. We're in control of our own destiny,
Right.
right? We're not dependent on LJ. We just gotta go find a pump that runs. Talk to Chris.
Yeah, I look at all the liabilities. that go
The
along with
insurance
that.
side, and all.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you could find an independent contractor, you know, somewhere in your system, I mean, they're fueling up their diesel machines all the time.
Right,
I
right.
don't know.
The Homies, the La Rivieres,
Yeah, yeah.
they have trucks that are bringing in diesel every morning, every day, all summer long. They don't rent those out like LJ does. But if those types of folks are faced with not having water, they are gonna step up, right? Whether that's a Hattenberg or a Pounder or the folks that we do, Garski's,
Yeah, or
the
just be
Douglases.
there for us.
Yeah, you know, there's some reaching out. This is a community problem and it's a
Yeah.
community solution.
Yeah.
Well, we
Right.
should have we should have a written contingency plan for that then, and not, we think we can get, that kind of thing, so.
Certainly, and that's what's in our emergency planning is basically what I've just stated. We're gonna try to attempt to get LJ to bring us fuel. We're gonna get as much fuel as we can. Are you first in line or are you last in line?
You're gonna be in line somehow.
Yeah, but like you say, they've got the fuel, but we've got the water.
Right,
You want water?
yeah, exactly. Turns into the resource wars at a certain point.
Crossroads.
The other benefit that we have that I wanna remind you guys of is we have 2 interties with the city. We're going to rebuild one of them and make it more robust. In that world where we can't make water, we have friends that can hopefully send us some water too as a part of that contingency plan.
And they've got a better power kind of situation.
And so that's part of the solution in the emergency plan, that's
Okay. Nothing else for open forum? No executive session?
Executive session.
We're adjourned.
Thanks a lot. See you
really
later.
passionate about this. Sorry.
You kind of tell.
There.
So I'll try to stop by tomorrow.